We tried to stop the song and it just felt all awkward, like it was supposed to have kept going, and it was just us finding, how do we set this thing back to the ground? How does it land? This thing back to the ground. How does it land? Set this thing back to the ground. How does it land? How do we set this thing back to the ground? How does it land?
Welcome to Weird Music. This is an album that needs no introduction. This is Dopesmoker by Sleep. Right, yeah, so welcome to the special episode on Sleep. This is an episode that I wanted to make for a long time, truth be told. You know, I'd say I'm a huge fan of the band Sleep, you know, just phenomenal stuff they do, and yeah, today we're going to talk about the behemoth of an album known as Dopesmoker, or Jerusalem, depending on which version you have, of course. Yep, the truly ferocious hour-long stoner doom suite that pummels you with its never-ending riff. And it has a rather fascinating story behind its creation, conception, and release, so yeah, I'm excited to talk about this one. So, as we do on this show, in case there's people who don't know, we're going to ask ourselves, who are Sleep? Well, Sleep is a stoner doom metal project that's been knocking around since the early 90s, arguably. Comprised of mostly members Al Cisneros on bass guitar and Matt Pike on guitar. And the two have been the two main consistent members of the band throughout the band's history. You know, you've originally had Chris Haikus being the band's original drummer and Jason Order being the band's current drummer. And so, together, Sleep push out some of the most brilliantly slow and heavy stoner doom music, producing a rather small discography of albums, but it's one that just keeps delivering with each and every release though. Perfect headbanging music that really gets you going. It's truly brilliant stuff. Introduction's done and out the way. So let's ask ourselves, what is Dopesmoker? Well, Dopesmoker, or Jerusalem as some people will know it by, is the colossal hour-long riff-laden stoner doom song that just proceeds and then never lets up for the entirety of its runtime. Truly one of the most satisfying songs, heavy songs ever recorded. It's brilliant, and what I find brilliant as well, when it comes to discussing the album, we're really all going to be discussing one single song. And to be fair though, we have talked about long singular compositions on the channel before, with Richard Chartier, for example. That was just one very long song and stuff. Yeah, have we ever covered anything that's just all about the riff? I don't think so. But yeah, this song, it's so indulgent. It's so heavy and it's so satisfyingly doomy, just a perfect dirge that is a massive monument to, funnily enough, just getting high, right? It's such a very peculiar and, frankly, rather outrageous sentiment for an entire song. But Sleep pull it off so effortlessly, so brilliantly, that it becomes one of the most satisfying recordings you could ever get your ears around, especially when you're just a fan of really heavy, dense music that just bombards you with this overload of metal dirge, you know. So let's talk about the song then, shall we? So, Dopesmoker, Jerusalem, etc., etc. It opens up with this incredibly fuzzy drone of guitars, letting this feedback ring out before you get the incredibly heavy riff starting the procession that will begin the hour-long proceedings. It instantly establishes the scene of standing out in the middle of the desert in the hot, sweltering sun, just sweating away as you're blinded by this light that's bouncing across the sand dunes. It's truly brilliant, this opening, because you get time to sit comfortably with the opener for a couple of minutes until you get a thumping of the bass and the pounding of the drums starting to back it all up, basically. And in comes the incredibly doomy dirge. It's all so loud and fuzzed out beyond belief, but it's so satisfying how this sounds. Like, it's truly brilliant. And then, yeah, like, you're barely any way into this song. It's another 5 minutes or so of this pounding riff before we even get the beginning of the vocals, though. Like, it's growled out in such an amazingly low register by Al Cisneros, you know, immediately expressing that Weedian notion with the opening line of "drop out of life with bomb in hand." And to be fair, according to Cisneros himself, you know, he said himself, "I was really dependent on the space I got into when I was using it." And some of the lyrics are about that. The line, "drop out of life, bong in hand," was kind of a creed at that point. And so yeah, the whole Weedian thing, it's one of the main focal points for both the band and most definitely this song in its entirety. Though I'd say though it does explore some other things. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, it's truly outrageous and bombastic, but a brilliant way to open up this song, no doubt. And of course, onwards it proceeds, onwards, that heavy low-end bass just consistently pushing it further and further alongside the absurdly consistent drumming from Haikus, which like just holds the whole track together so brilliantly, you know. It's just so satisfying, you know. It's a song that, like, arguably, it continues so much along in the exact same vein, though you do get like various sections throughout the recording where you get little different things happening, like, you know, Matt Pike's given a bit of room to do some, you know, really cool guitar solos, alongside, you know, that very heavy, dense layer that, you know, Cisneros and Haikus are just backing the whole thing up with. But there's even time to, like, you know, give all those layers time to fade out and then bring it to sort of subsided silence before it all just builds back up with a squealing of distorted feedback as you get that slow, indulgent riff again. And so, yeah, like, to be honest, it's going to be incredibly hard to dissect this entire song, but I'll try my best though, you know, on some level, you know. You know, so much of it just falls into its various sections, you know, drums, bass, guitars, pushing along variations of the riff along, while Al just howls out its heavily weed-laden imagery. But there's so many brilliant moments though, like, one particular bit I like is around 40 minutes in. It all just subsides into this really quiet section, where you get this almost clean guitar tone just picking at the riff, and, you know, gives it a bit of room to just sort of be there, do its thing, before the bass and drums just come back in and it just builds it all back up again, and you're just thrown back into that big riff again. Oh goodness, yeah. It all just crashes it back down to earth, and it lets that caravan proceed with its ever-long march towards Jerusalem. And then, yeah, it just continues to pummel you after that, you know. You get that heavy riff once again, which I would say by this point even, you know, it's around 40 minutes in or so, you're battered by this recording. It's just like, whoa. But it's so bizarre how it's essentially an hour-long song that just pushes out the same riff over and over again with a couple of variations, truth be told, like it's like Al says.
Don't you know any other riff? And they will pay attention closely because they're all very.
Oh, I had to include that bit. It's like he said. Like, I think it's brilliant how he says it's so funny. But yeah, it just pushes over with the same riff, and yet it's brilliant listening to the entirety of this recording. And also, just to go back to the documentary again, it's like what journalist Jay Bennett says, you know, in the wonderful documentary Such Hawks, Such Hounds. You know,
sometimes the riff is just so fucking good that you just want to hear it over and over and over again. Sometimes for 52 minutes, you know.
And let's be honest, sometimes they're just right, you know. People who no doubt love and adore this track will definitely know what's meant by this really peculiar sentiment, no doubt. My goodness though, what a recording though, what a recording. Like, it's a truly ridiculous, like, but brilliant thing to have envisioned and pushed out as a tangible recording. You know, there's other bits we can actually go into when talking about this song though, you know. The version of Dopesmoker I've got comes with this incredibly handy chart actually, that the band actually used to track the progression of the song itself in terms of its various movements from section to section when they were recording it and writing it. And it gives us, this diagram actually gives us a wonderful insight into the inner mechanisms of the song itself. You know, it's truly astounding how a band could even, you know, write something as audacious as this. But according to Matt Pike, though, the actual structure is somewhat simple. I mean, of course it would be to the person playing the thing, right? But it's like he says, though.
Fucking with like just kind of these weird, like kind of almost Indian music scales. We let the drummer on that song like carry that song. You know what I mean? That whole song's based off drums and timing and hitting in the right spot.
It's all built around the drums. And yeah, looking at the chart though, it's somewhat of an overload of what's really going on underneath the surface of the track itself. Like, there's of course other structural parts we can look at, you know, that being the lyrics. And yeah, Dopesmoker Jerusalem has some truly ridiculous yet oddly brilliant lyrics across its hour-long runtime, giving us that wheeling procession towards Jerusalem and Nazareth. And it all comes out as this incredibly doomy quasi-religious chant that pushes and pushes the more this caravan continues to proceed across this incredibly hot desert. And I think, you know, the main interpretation of the song itself was best summed up by Jay Bennett again in the documentary, who tells us,
but the lyrics sort of incorporated this sort of like bong huffing caravan through the Holy Land.
yeah, like, how else can you really put it? Like, so true. Ridiculous, but so brilliant, so brilliant. So, yeah, with that we've vaguely covered the album's track, you know. No, it's I'll be honest, it's really hard to write about this track, truth be told, but it's a special episode today, so we're gonna push on. There's a little bit more we can talk about, though, behind the recording of this particular track. You know, the actual recording of it and the release is a truly fascinating story. We're going to talk about it briefly. Like, we're not going to go as in-depth as some of the other YouTube videos out there, which I would also recommend watching as well, like if you want to know more though, because they've covered this brilliantly, but we'll just talk about it a little bit, you know? So, the title of this whole recording is actually very interesting. It's been known as both Dopesmoker and Jerusalem over the years, and it's even been released under both of these names at various points in time. And so the album was planned to be the next Sleep album, following on from the brilliant 1992 record Sleep's Holy Mountain, which was a pinnacle of satisfying slow stoner doom and easily features some of the band's best compositions. Looking at you, Dragonaut. From my research though, Sleep had this song under the belt for so many years, but actually recording it in the studio was an incredibly arduous task, and releasing it turned out to be even more so. And so, the basic version of the story of the recording release, it's a classic tale of band versus record label. Sleep had spent a long time wrangling with their previous record label, Earache Records, trying to get out of the contract they had with them at the time. And eventually, after finally managing so, after the release of that contract, they signed to none other than London Records, which is somewhat of a major label for the band, who promised the band artistic freedom. And it's very interesting because, London Records didn't really have any metal bands on the red labels, so, Pike thought they would be given preferential treatment apparently, but we'll see how that ends up. But in any case, the Sleep went into the studio to record this, this colossal track, this magnum opus, that their hour-long suite that they'd written. And they went in, and it was an incredibly hazy experience, no doubt, that took many, many months to complete. And according to Pike himself, the band ended up with about 2 or 3 different versions of the song itself, And shortly after signing to London Records, the A&R, artist and repertoire member of the label, responsible for negotiating with the band, he was transferred and replaced. And this created a very tumultuous experience for Sleep when they tried to submit the record to London Records, as they were told that they were not going to release the album in its current format, which is completely outrageous, right? And this led to the label remixing the album and generally creating this really confusing situation where nobody knew what to do with it. And then, as a result of that, remix, which was completely unauthorized by the band, there's now about 4 or 5 or so different versions of Jerusalem and Dopesmoker out there. You've got the sort of original version, or originally released version, on Rise Above Records, which runs for around 52 minutes in length, as well as the partially unofficial versions of the album featuring artwork by Eric Roper, of course, the wonderful Eric Roper. And this was released in around 98 or so. This particular version of the album is generally seen as the unauthorized edited version, and whilst still sort of arguably interesting, it really strayed away from the band's original vision for the song itself. So, kind of a shame, it, created this really, this rift in the band, actually. They really struggled with it all, and we'll get into that a little bit later, actually, but, we'll fast forward a bit. Get to around 2003, and then, the original version is then re-released in its unedited form, and this is the version we know as Dopesmoker, released on TP Records. And this version consolidated hour-long version of the song, and is generally seen as a much more faithful version of the recording that Sleep had originally submitted. And this is perhaps the version so many of us know and love of the song, featuring an updated artwork from Eric Roper again. But of course, there's actually the version that we've been specifically looking at today, which is the 2012 release of Dopesmoker on none other than Southern Lord Records. And this features another updated album artwork by Eric Roper. And I'll be honest, this is the version I'm most familiar with, though. Easily my favourite version of the album, as it's got a much clearer mix of the entire recording. Like, those really dense heavy metal layers are so crisp and clear. Like, when you listen to it, it just sounds so much more concise and louder in all the right parts. It's truly brilliant. And as well, the artwork by Roper for this one, this is probably my favourite out of all the different artworks he did, though. He's offered us this, Dune Star Wars-esque caravan proceeding to the Holy Lands. And it should be worth mentioning as well, this particular version was remastered by guitarist Brad Boatwright from the band From Ashes Rise. And I have to say, brings out so much more in the recordings than the original version did, And as well, it should be mentioned as that this particular release I've got offers us the bonus live track of Holy Mountain from the band's previous album, a live version of it. And it's a little bonus for buyers of this particular version. Like, You know me with bonus tracks though, I'm always a bit sort of iffy because I like albums as they were originally envisioned, but it's still a very cool recording and, you know, in a weird way, kind of offers a little bit of respite after listening to the hour-long version of Dopesmoker here. But yeah, going back to the effect that the record label and their resistance to release the album had, you know, the sort of immense difficulty in both recording the record and releasing the record, it sadly estranged Sleep from each other.
You guys estranged for a while after Sleep?
Yeah, here and there.
All of us were.
Yeah, there's a lot of pain and didn't know quite what to say to each other, and there was still love, and there was love and hate and confusion, and we just had to sort it out for a while.
I hadn't talked to Chris for a number of years after the whole Dopesmoker thing, but and then Al, it was a very sad thing actually. Al stopped playing music altogether for 5 years. I won't say altogether, but he wasn't very public about like seeing anybody or, you know, being in a band or anything like that.
Yeah, to be honest with, it's sad that, you know, such difficulties arose from this particular record in the band. And, you know, one of the saddest parts actually in this documentary, which is truly fascinating look at, you know, the history of doom music actually as well, like definitely worth watching if you haven't seen it. It's very sad though that the revelation that Al actually turned away from music for many, many years after this, because he became so estranged and disillusioned, I would feel, you know. For such a talented and influential bassist to be turned away from, you know, his own creative outlet, I find that to be an incredibly sad thing. But of course, things do have a way of working themselves out, you know. Following on, you know, a couple of years after, Al and Chris did go on to form the legendary band On, which a sort of continuation of the really doomy rhythms of Sleep, albeit in a much more stranger, meditative and desert-like style. And then Matt Pike, of course, went to form High on Fire, the thrashy speed metal band that really let him express himself in his own way, which is very cool, I feel. But of course, the story doesn't really end there, of course. There was, like, in 2009, there was a couple of sporadic live shows from the band, but it was in 2018, you know, fans were truly blessed on the 20th of April, no doubt, when the band surprisingly released an album, The Sciences, on Third Man Records. And this was the first Sleep album to feature Jason Roeder, and I would argue this essentially just picks up exactly where Sleep left off, you know, giving us pummeling heavy stoner dooms that, you know, I would say features some of the band's best compositions and songs, you know. I'm a massive fan of Antarctican's Thought. Like, I just love how that track opens, the riffs in it, how it just plays out and just gets really low and dense and doomy. It's such a brilliant recording. And so, yeah, a legendary and monumental album experience that has truly cemented its place in the hearts of many fans of the doom metal genre, and of course stoner doom as well, like it has to be said, you know, for its incredibly bombastic and audacious album experience. You know, it's such an immensely heavy and doomy record, and it's so satisfying for fans of metal who just want their music to be both loud and slow, really slow. And I think as a result, it's truly amazing to listen to. It's like, for me, I find this album to be perfect to listen to on the London Underground system. You know, you go, like, some of the lines in that are so incredibly loud, like you just hear the trains whizzing by, like so blaringly loud. So listening to something like this just drowns it out in such a wonderfully satisfying way, you know. So brilliant, so brilliant. I think as well, like, you know, I think with that we've come to the end of today's episode of Weird Music. You know, Sleep are definitely a weird band in my books, but they're just one that push out such satisfyingly heavy music, you know. And I figured as well, with this episode being, the 20th of April special, what band would be more appropriate to cover than the legendary Sleep? truly legendary band who pushed out a monumental album with an absurd story behind the whole thing. And of course, we've only just touched upon it lightly. It's like I mentioned earlier, there's many amazing video essays diving into the whole story much more deeply and stuff. And of course, the documentaries Such Hawks, Such Hounds, which is well worth watching if you've ever been interested in doom music, you know? So if you're interested in finding out more, I've put a whole bunch of additional links in the description for you to below, as well as of course links to, find Dopesmoker and Jerusalem by Sleep, whichever version you're interested in hearing. And so yeah, with that, I hope you've enjoyed watching this special 420 episode of Weird Music. I wish you all the best, take care, and bye-bye for now. Bye-bye!
Well, the weed part's totally true. We blew a lot of money on weed and time and just the delivering the master in a skull bong. Well, no. It'd be a good idea. I wish we would have thought of it.